Hi, everyone. Welcome to the Mindful Play Summit. We have Brenna Hassinger-Das, Ph.D. She's an assistant professor and psychology at Pace University, New York City. Her research examines children's play and learning in home, schools, and community contexts, particular for children experiencing poverty. Her areas of expertise encompass executive functioning, early number sense, and vocabulary acquisition. She's particularly interested in investigating the role of play and games for learning, and she's committed to translating her research for the public through community-based research projects, as well as blog posts and commentaries featured in outlets such as the Huffington Post, WHYY, and as well as additional local outlets. So welcome, Brenna. Thank you so much.
Hi, Crystal. Thanks for having me.
Thanks for coming. So I am so interested in the research that you do, and I'm curious to know if you could tell us a little bit about yourself and how you started.
Sure. Like you mentioned, I'm now an assistant professor in a psychology department, but it's been a road to get there. I actually started out as an anthropology person who wanted to be an archaeologist, and nothing of what I do now. But I became interested. I actually did a year of service after college. I joined AmeriCorps here in the States, which is like, it's like the Peace Corps, only it's within the United States. So it's like basically like a year of volunteer work. And I was placed with a youth mentoring program in the state of Delaware. And while doing that, I became really interested in working with kids and in school settings. And eventually from there, we get to me being in a PhD program. And I'm doing what I wanted to do, studying and working with kids. And I ended up working with some mentors who were very interested in play as a context for learning. And I really got excited about that idea, incorporated that into my dissertation, did a postdoc working a lot with play. And now here I am as, a professor myself. And a lot of what my lab is studying is related to play. And I'm also a mom. I have a 6.5-year-old son. And so I get to see play happening, every day in my house in addition to my research. And I just really, have found through my journey to get to this point, the importance of play, the importance of play for kids' learning and development, and just how it's the perfect context for, learning on their own. And then also it's a great context for having adult support for learning. So I've done a lot of research looking into those things, and that's kind of how I ended up where I'm at now.
Beautiful. So how important is play for development?
Oh, I mean, I would argue that it's absolutely critical. I think, I can't remember exactly who the quote is from. It might be Fred Rogers. It could be someone else, said about play, actually, or could have been Piaget. Play is the work of childhood, basically. And that is what kids do. I say that to my son all the time. That's your job. Mommy's job is to be a professor, and your job is to play and to learn. And so we know that, the United Nations has recognized play as a right of childhood, other rights of childhood. So play is absolutely critical. And that's why I think a lot of the work that I do is focused on children who are experiencing poverty, because a lot of times, when resources are not there as much, whether it's in school or it's in the community setting or it's in the home setting, there become less opportunities for play. And I'm really interested in figuring out how we can help children play regardless of economic circumstances, and how we can build on the strengths of children and families where they're at to have play happen.
I love that. And, as you were talking, I kind of did one of these because I could see your son poking his head up. And it's fun because as adults, and, especially, being in your field, being in my field, or being a parent or caregiver, hey, bud, the idea is that we can let go and allow ourselves to also play, right? And I just, even you know, being on this call and he's poking his head over there, it's easy for you to say, you know, not right now, but, you know, I just love the interaction and I will always, you know, wave and, make a little face or whatever, because it brings out that joy in myself to allow myself to play. And I feel like sometimes, you know, we create these boxes or we create these bubbles or like, you know, how we're supposed to be or interact. And if we can just release all that and let it go and enjoy the play as well, we as parents, caregivers, educators get so much joy out of the experience. So I absolutely love that at that point. Now, let's just say, for instance, you know, some of your, you know, games that you were talking about, like, you know, learning in home and schools and within the community. Is there something particular that our listeners can take away? I mean, outside of just kind of letting go those boundaries to play, is there certain things that you could suggest amongst, you know, our listeners that they could integrate? Like, it could be something simple at the dinner table, or, you know, what's kind of your number one tip there?
Yeah, I think that, you know, one of the big things is just looking at everyday interactions as opportunities for playful engagement. So that's something that's a lot of my work has looked at in community settings. You know, we've looked at transforming everyday places like supermarkets and bus stops into places for playful learning. And much of that is around caregiver-child conversation, you know.
It's
Go
perfect.
ahead, bud. Go ahead, bud. Thank you. Drove a Lego in my hair. Got a little caught there.
It didn't get stuck.
Yeah, a little bit. So one of our main outcomes that we look at in those projects is for caregiver-child communication and around the things that are being presented. So in a supermarket, for example, a sign saying, you know, asking people to kids to compare weights of fruits or colors, look for fruits of certain colors. It's just ways that we can encourage people to have fun engagement in a setting like that. So at dinner, you know, same idea, coming up with, my son and I we play I Spy all the time when we're like out on walks or doing other things, or we have to wait in a waiting room or something. We play a little game like I Spy, and sometimes we come up with, you know, rules that it has to be a certain way. For this one, we can only find things that are, you know, start with the letter N or something. So it's ways that we can have fun, but also promoting like literacy skills and things like that. Another thing that I would say I even use as a parent has been, there's a lot of great resources, like Vroom offers an app that'll give you like a tip for interacting with your kids every day. And I have used those. I use the app, the bedtime math app, which is, it gives you like math activities you can do with your kid around bedtime or anytime. I found some of those have been really nice because they will like give me a notification and it gives me like a little something that I can add in to sort of spice up interactions. And I think really this idea of like gamification of interactions, like kids, you know, kids love to play games, and games are part of the conceptualization of playful learning that my colleagues and I have developed. You know, we see games as part of free play, you know, where kids have, you know, they have all the agency in free play, and then guided play where kids can direct, but the adult does sort of like infuse some learning opportunities. And then we have games that have like inherent rules and structures within them, whether the child developed them or an adult developed them, but they are a good context for learning things like vocabulary, and other, you know, learning topics. But I think that being able to turn, you know, sort of opening your mind to the possibilities of what can happen in an everyday interaction, and think about following children's lead. We know another thing that's really important, not just in play, but in general, is asking open-ended questions of children. So that's like while you're playing, or even like when you're reading a storybook or doing anything, asking children questions that are not just yes, no, one word answer, but asking them like, what do you think? What might happen? How does that work? Asking those kinds of questions are amazing for helping to foster kids' learning and also critical thinking and creativity. So I try to do a lot of that also just in our daily interactions. If we see something happening, say, why do you think that, why do you think they're doing that? Or how do you think that'll turn out? Or, getting kids to think in that way. And it can also help them come up with some, imaginary scenarios or other creative things. So I think really just this whole COVID-19 pandemic has given, it's caused a lot of, it's caused a lot of issues to come to the fore with regard to, disparities between folks from different groups, but also it has given some opportunities for, I think, reflection on how we can, within family units, support like fun, playful activities, because a lot of kids are not in school, they're not with peers. So we are generating these activities in the home setting. And I'm trying to approach that for the most part as the gift of COVID to me is to, learn how to do more of this. Especially my son, he's an only child, so it's mostly him and me. Doing a lot of these things, and we've managed to have a lot of fun and trying to, have the fun and have the play while we know all this is going on. And we're trying to also protect kids, from anxiety and like other things like that. So I really think this has been quite the moment for kind of finding a new way in some ways.
Absolutely. And when you're talking, what comes to my mind is the connection piece, right? And when we talk about, integrating some of these playful learnings, it's not just like, okay, we're going to select between 1 and 2. It's allowing the natural progression, if you're out for a walk, or like you say, you're sitting at the dinner table and people have, okay, well, no elbows on, everyone has different dinner table rules, but it doesn't have to be anything where it's like, okay, what color is your banana? Those things, but it could be just the connection piece around it. Well, what does that taste? Is it, and allowing the play to come through when you're already doing certain activities where you don't have to, resort your day to incorporate. It's stacking it upon things that you're already doing, but enriching that opportunity. So I really love how you've explained that. And when I hear you talking, it allows me to reference what's happening in the world. And it's that connection piece, right? And understanding that you might be the only, partner to play with your child at these times, right? So thank you so much for that. Now, when we talk about data and, how that demonstrates effectiveness and how, people can get involved, what does data show you for play-based learning?
So, there's a lot of data that suggests the effectiveness of play-based learning. And in particular, I've conducted work that's looked at games for vocabulary learning with preschoolers. So in a study we looked at a game that featured words. It was like colored squares, and kids would spin a spinner and have to move to another square just based on color. And then they would answer a question about a target word from a book they read. And we did this in comparison to the same game without the words, but the kids did review the words an extra time. So they all heard the words the same times, they all, everything, but the kids learned better who played the game. And we theorized that was because the game, and this is how a lot of research about video games and other things relies on this idea of flow, which is this idea that games kind of piggyback, the content of games like piggybacks on the fun and engaging nature to create this flow experience that helps you learn better because you're having fun while you're doing it. It helps you retain the content more. So I've also done work that's looking at particularly at these community-based installations. One was called Urban Thinkscape that it's still installed. It's in Philadelphia, Pennsylvania. And it was a series of 4 installations that targeted different learning concepts. So some were looking at literacy, spatial skills, things like that. And we looked at caregiver child engagement and language. So were they talking about spatial terms? Were they talking about number words if we're targeting math? Are they using this literacy talk, like talking about letters and sounds? And so we found that once this had been installed at this formerly, it was at a bus stop and an adjacent lot that really didn't have anything else on it. And we compared it to a playground in the same neighborhood. And we found that once we installed these designs, we saw huge increases in just the amount of time that caregivers and kids were talking to each other while waiting for the bus or while going, you know, on their daily way through this space. So I did another project that was in libraries in Philadelphia, found very similar things where we changed the, worked with designers to change the children's library spaces. And we found same kinds of increases. We also found just big increases in the number of kids that were coming to programs at the library, regardless if they were using those spaces for the programs, they just was getting more kids to the library. So we've been seeing these, you know, the ability of these playful learning spaces to make changes in behavior in, you know, out on the street and in community settings. There's also a great deal of research that just suggests that guided play is very good for helping to learn things like vocabulary and literacy skills. I worked on a large scale project in Head Start preschools where we used guided play as a context for learning, and we found pretty significant gains in kids' vocabulary knowledge when they would read the book, and then they would do like a guided play scenario with toys from the story. And that was working with teachers and having teachers help lead the intervention. So we've seen a lot of evidence that suggests that playful learning in our conceptualization with free play, guided play, and games, and guided play in particular, can help if you have a specific learning goal in mind. And then of course, free play, there's lots of research that suggests free play is great for, you know, developing social emotional skills, and learning lots of other things like in math, lots of evidence about free play, helping develop some understandings. But it seems to be that guided play is best when we have a learning goal particularly in mind, but free play is, you know, critical just for, you know, physical activity and, you know, developing a lot of these like relational skills and building on concepts that kids have already learned and kind of practicing them and trying them out. You know, that's a great way to do that is through free play. And games also seem to be pretty good for content heavy stuff. Like if you really want kids to learn new words, particular list of words or something, like having them learn through a game seems to be a good context for that also.
When you're speaking, it reminds me of, you know, 17 years ago when I was going through my training, and our group got separated into two groups, and one group got to go in and it was like, here's your station, go at her, do what you need to do. And what actually happened was the other group came in, it was like, Kate, this is what you need to do, this is how you're going to do it. And we were told how to create, or, you know, how we're going to do it, each piece. And at the end, it was like, well, how did you feel? And the group that was just told how to do it, when to do it, we were all just like disengaged, you know, watching the other group just have a great old time. But it allowed us as the caregiver to feel the restraints, to feel the closed box, right? Where the other group got to fully express themselves. They got to create, they got to enjoy and learn more from the experience. And when we look at what you're speaking on, and as caregivers as well, being able to feel that and to see that experience has allowed the shaping of how we deliver our program, so to speak. So I love that example of allowing the children to guide, you know, with free play, but also guided play and loose parts, and it's fun. I want to learn it because it's fun. And then I remember, because I'm playing a game around it, versus just here's a piece of paper, that's the letter A, or here's a piece of paper, right? There's this it's not colorful. It doesn't have texture to it. It doesn't have that emotion. So thank you so much for explaining all of that. And I would love to keep in touch because I want to learn more about the research that you're doing and hopefully support you along the way. Is there anything else you want to leave our guests with today? I'm going to post a link on below on who you are and where they can find you with your email and stuff. But yeah, is there anything else you wanted to mention?
Yeah. So I think two things. The first thing is one of the main reason we think why a lot of play works is from the research in the science of learning. There are really like 4 principles that my colleagues and I have kind of worked to identify that seem to, actually it's 5 principles that are why play is effective. So one is it's joyful, which we've talked about. 2 is it's that it's active. So it's like minds on, not passive. You have to critically think about it. Next one would be that it's engaging. So it's getting you, it's kind of like hooking you in. The next one reminded me of it with you we were just saying last is that it's meaningful. So it connects some way to the child's life or a previously learned, something they've learned previously or something, in their own lives. And that it's socially interactive. So that it encourages, like back and forth interaction. So that's why we think playful learning is effective, because it includes all of those principles from the science of learning. And then one final thing I'll say is that if folks are interested in learning more about these community-based projects, it's actually part of an initiative called the Playful Learning Landscapes Initiative. And it's one that I work on with some of my colleagues and also folks from the Brookings Institution in Washington, D.C. So if people are interested in learning more, we have a website. So if you Google Playful Learning Landscapes, it will come up. And we are also in the process of getting ready, it's not quite done yet, to release a playbook where we actually have a lot of examples of previous projects, ways folks could design their own projects or get involved in the initiative. So if people are interested, they're more than welcome to contact me at the information that you're going to be providing them.
That's amazing. Absolutely. I will post a link below. And I just want to say thank you so much for taking the time out, and we'll say bye to your son as well.
Yeah. Yes, thank you for having me, Crystal. I really appreciate it.